for the best coverage of the Jazz, Utes, and Cougars is right here on The Zone. This is JJ and Alex, presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. It's another edition of JJ and Alex right here, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Alex, Kirry, Jeremiah Jensen, thanks for being with us. It's Hockey Night in Utah again tonight. Yes, lots of home games in a row for this Utah Hockey Club, and, you might be disappointed by what the offense has been providing the last few games, especially, against some pretty darn good opponents. There's one thing you can expect out of Bear Tourney is getting his guys right and figuring some things out. The injuries have not been kind to the hockey club. Joining us on the program right now to start things off, of course, we want to remind you our show is brought to you by G2G Bars. All natural ingredients and no preservatives make the G2G Bar the perfect protein bar. How about, let's start things off with the cut. Let's have Travis Yost on again from TSN. He covers the NHL, of course, and that's where we're going to start things off right now.
It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
And the cut is always brought to you by the folks at the family of dealerships in the Doug Smith family. Doug Smith, Chevy, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, Subaru, Kia, and now, of course, Mitsubishi's under the family right there in American Fork, Spanish Fork, and, of course, in Linden. Travis Yost on the program here with us, covers the NHL for TSN. Travis, you're going to the game tonight at Delta Center, man. That's exciting.
Yeah, I got to do a little Montreal Canadian scouting, I guess. How you guys doing?
Tough draw. Well, we're interested. We're always interested to see what people think when they come in and kind of see what's going on and what Ryan Smith and Bill Armstrong and Chris Armstrong are putting together. But this team right now is trying to figure some things out. They are not looking good over their last 10 games. They've lost 8 of their last 10. And that's, it's been an up and down year for them. They're still in somewhat of the hunt. They are still above 500 technically. So what do you think so far of this Utah Hockey Club? Because I was reading something I think on ESPN today that said that they gave them a C+ on kind of their midseason grades. Where do you have this Utah Hockey Club?
Yeah, I think I'd probably grade them a little better than that. But it's interesting, right? I actually I filed something to TSN this week where I really do consider Utah one of the 4 teams, Vancouver, Calgary, St. Louis, and Utah, really vying for that final playoff berth, because the top 7, and I think that's the real story in the Western Conference, the top 7, which includes teams like Vegas and Edmonton and certainly in Utah's division, Winnipeg and Minnesota and Dallas and Colorado, they have so entrenched themselves ahead of that final 8th playoff spot that it really is just going to come down to those 4 teams. And I think the frustrating thing, if you're Utah, like when I'm looking at these 4 teams, I think Vancouver has the most talent today, but I don't really think Utah is all that far behind. And they've gotten incredible performance in the goaltending department to start the year, combined with their young players really outperforming at the top of their lineup. And, as of today, despite going 2-6-2 in their last 10 games, they are outscoring teams at even strength, which is the number one predictor for whether a team will go to the postseason or not. But you hit the nail on the head. Injuries, not just cluster injuries on the blue line, but impactful injuries at the top of the lineup. Dylan Guenther, obviously, the top of that list, have really thinned out the talent that is available on a nightly basis. You've seen a lot more line blendering. And I think more concerningly, you've seen the middle 6 or bottom 6 forwards that really have been getting beat up to some degree in the first half of the year. They're having to play more minutes against tougher competition. That is not necessarily a recipe for success. And I really think that's a key reason why Utah's been struggling over the last 10, 15 games.
No doubt about that. You also look at the fact that this team's played on the road more than any team in the league. There might have been a team that jumped up there with them recently, but for the most part in the last couple of weeks, they've been the most road-weary team in the NHL. Is that something that you think can help them? Because we look at their home record, and it actually hasn't been that great.
Well, yeah. So it's kind of funny. And by the way, speaking of teams with home records that aren't great, when you get done with this segment, go take a look at the Vancouver Canucks on home ice this year. So they are very much in a similar boat as Utah. But I'll tell you one thing. I think you ask any player A to Z, I don't care what your home record is in the last 50, 100 games, you always want to be playing on home ice, and there's a reason for it. It's the comfort of home. It's the comfort of the crowd behind you. Utah's obviously struggled to some degree on home ice this year, but one, they're not alone, and two, more importantly, I do think there is, especially when you go through periods where you have a heavy volume of travel coupled with injuries and cluster injuries at a given position. Boy, that can build up the fatigue in a hurry. And I think this is an even more reason why you want to be on home ice, especially for an opponent tonight coming in, which, Montreal might be 2,000 miles away, but they're similarly situated to this Utah team. They have been in a multi-year rebuild. Obviously, Utah carrying on from what Arizona was trying to build in Phoenix. The rebuild has been a challenge. They've been toiling the bottom of the Eastern Conference for several years. But all of a sudden, the Canadians have gotten hot, right? And I actually think their record is now on par with Utah, and I believe they've won seven or eight of their last 10 games. So even they're, to the extent that Utah is really on let's say a 30-day decline, if there's any team that's surging around the NHL right now, it's Montreal. So you got to take the good with the bad. You got the good. You're playing at home ice in front of your crowd. You got the bad. You do have a hot opponent coming in here that will be game for this matchup.
It's funny because in every sport you kind of do this, and it has never. And everything's new for us, right? For the season, we've talked to you about that a bunch. Where it's like, all right, we're trying to figure out the in and out breathing, of this beast that is the NHL regular season, and. When teams roll in the NBA, you kind of go, yeah, that should be a winnable game. That should be a winnable game. We've tried to do that with hockey, too, and be like, look, the next 3 games for this hockey club, you can win these games. And it's like, you say that a bunch, and they haven't been doing it. And then at the same time, they're winning games that people look at and go, how did they win that game? And that seems to be something that doesn't happen in the other big sports. Is that just something that is it's just kind of unique to maybe this Utah hockey club, or is it just that good a parity in the NHL?
There is a lot of parity in the NHL, and let me emphasize this, especially when you are comparing it to the NBA. Like, these two leagues could not be multiple. There are multiple universes apart at this point. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when I was younger and less gray, several people took a look at how many games does it actually take for talent to overcome random chance or luck in the standings. This is about 10, 15 years ago. For the NBA, it was only 14 games. So effectively a month into the season, you were already starting to see the cream of the crop rise to the top of the divisions, and they would generally hold their positions throughout, the rest of the regular season, where your minnows really sink. And that's a problem the NBA has to deal with, right? You got a lot of markets that are tuned off of their teams by January, February, when they're really struggling, unless they have a compelling reason to watch. The NHL, especially because of the third point and the overtime implications, it takes 73 games on an 82-game season for talent to overcome luck in the standings. And the number one thing that I recommend, especially to people who either casually getting into the sport or let's say casual observers, especially many people in Salt Lake who may have casually watched the sport, now you're watching every single night, never fixate on single-game outcomes because you'll pull the hair out of your head. I mean, I just watched a Rangers team that has printed bad news for the first 3 months of the season on an every single day basis. Go into T-Mobile and beat the Golden Knights. It's like that. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which way you're looking through it, that happens more frequently. And the way I always think about team is how are you performing in chunks? How are you performing in 2-3 week stretches? Because that's where noise has less of an impact. It's just a very low-scoring, lower-event game in the NHL where, 3 or 4 goals on average is going to be enough to win a game in the NHL. In the NBA, you're making 40, 45 field goals on a nightly basis, right? So the NHL is much more sensitive to random chance outcomes. Does that mean at the end of the year the best teams aren't in the playoffs? Of course not. It just takes a lot longer to get there, and you hit the nail on the head. A big reason why is single-game variances can be crazy in the NHL.
You just wrote about that last wild card spot and the teams chasing it. Of those 4 teams, the Flames, Canucks, Blues, and Utah Hockey Club, who do you think has the best chance and the best odds of locking up that last spot?
It's a fascinating question. I don't think Calgary is well equipped to chase this down, and I would probably put them last. And I'm not really impressed with St. Louis's roster. I thought it was would have been, if you asked me a month ago, I thought it would have been a reasonably tight race with Vancouver and then Utah in that order. I still think there's a chance that Utah can get into that, let's say, de facto 9th spot and make this a bit more of a race, but they need to start picking up some points in a hurry. And the problem that I see from Utah's perspective, you're struggling at the wrong time. I mean, you are giving the front office, right, wrong, or otherwise, every reason to say, you know what, this season was found money to begin with. We can trade a couple of veterans right now and keep stocking the cupboards because this offseason we are going to have an exorbitant amount of cap space in a league experiencing pretty good year-over-year revenue growth where that should raise the cap. Utah can be as aggressive as they practically want this summer. I know that's not what people want to hear, but to me, that's the beauty of where you're at right now. It's January 14th. The players on this that are making up this lineup today have about a 4 to 6 week tryout to show, hey, look, we can actually get back into this race and contend with Vancouver for that last spot. But again, it's you watch the last month or so of play, and it's just left you wanting. I certainly don't think they are putting playoff hockey on display right now. But to some degree, you understand injuries have really ravaged this team in a challenging way right now. Unfortunately, I do think if the losing continues, I do think that will inform Utah's at least short-term decision-making for this season. We'll see about that. But by the way, like we talked about, I emphasize top 7 because if you're Vancouver and you think, okay, we still have the most talent of these 4 teams across the roster. We just got Thatcher Demko, a superstar goalie, back. We'll be okay. I mean, you got to look at it from the front office of the Vancouver Canucks perspective, which is best case scenario, I'm drawing into an all-time gauntlet round 1. Does it even make sense for our organization to be buyers come the trade deadline March 8th? I do think that is the fascinating part of the NHL schedule that we're entering into right now, and several big decisions for several big teams coming up in the West.
Travis, one of the things I'm trying to figure out with the NHL too is the insane money, right, that is thrown at guys. I think when I was, this must have been at this point 10 or 12 or maybe even 15 years ago. Ilya Kovalchuk, remember when he signed that, like, it was like a 20-year deal or something like that with the Devils? There's like a 15 or 18-year deal. And I'm like, this is such a hockey contract to me, right? Like, because the money is not as insane as we're getting. And this is the thing we complain about for the other big sports. But where's hockey's collective bargaining agreement and the money that are paid to these athletes kind of going direction-wise? Obviously, you've got just things going up and up and up because TV contracts are worth more and more and more these days. But where does hockey kind of live in that world of long-term contracts, guaranteed money, and all that compared to these other leagues that we follow?
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting, I would say, variances or differences between like what people in Salt Lake and the NBA would be accustomed to versus the NHL. NBA, you've got the soft cap, you got a luxury tax that allows teams to really balloon their salary. Fundamentally different in the NHL, right? You've got a hard salary cap. People who are anti-Vegas Golden Knights fans would say, well, certain teams use tools like long-term injured reserve to skirt the salary cap ceiling. That's a little bit more in the weeds of the CBA. But
last year it was we got to get Arizona to spend above the floor. Let's go here.
Well, so it's funny. I'll spare you the long version of this, but if you go back, there was probably a 3-year stretch where I spent a lot of time covering the Coyotes, but also before the financial and business vehicle that I thought that they were routinely, and this is before the late stages of the Coyotes that I think everyone was kind of aware of what was going on. They were using LTIR to just stay above the salary cap floor on a yearly basis, and any guy who developed a skin rash, cough Marian Hossa, or Pavel Datsyuk, Shea Weber. I mean, the Hall of Fame that the Coyotes could have sent through over the years was incredible, but these guys never played a single game for them. That said, in terms of like contracts and where they're going, I think one of the interesting things in the NHL is because you have a hard cap, teams really – it's a zero-sum game. So teams really have to chew on, I think, to a larger degree, how aggressive am I willing to go on an average annual value for a star and or a superstar player because of the ramifications it'll have for the rest of my lineup. And you see that – you've seen that over the years with a team like the Edmonton Oilers, who I think are very well positioned right now to win a Stanley Cup. But for many years, they've had to challenge with – we have McDavid and Draisaitl, who, by the way, they're coming up on new contracts, consuming such an exorbitant piece of the cap that we only really have peanuts on a relative basis to deploy through the rest of the roster. And it's why for many years you heard people rightly critical of Edmonton being a very top-heavy team. Other teams are more willing to or less willing to go to the high end of what that contract range that can be anywhere from $13, $14, $15 million a year they're less willing to go that route because they want more money to spend across the rest of the roster. Problem you have there is you have less confidence in that player's longer-term ability. Superstars are superstars for a reason, and that's why they command the big bucks. So I actually, that part of the salary cap, there's many things that we could honestly go for 6 hours about the NHL CBA. I'll probably bore your audience to tears, but one of the things that I really do like about the NHL, or I've grown to like more over the years, I do like the hard cap. I do wish that they would fix the LTIR loophole, but I do think the hard cap in a league where all 32 teams are reasonably willing to spend, I do think it creates the good degree of parity that the league wants, and I think that's a good thing.
Utah Hockey Club in desperate need of good news, and they got some today that John Marino will be in the lineup tonight for the first time this season, and an acquisition this summer around the draft that they got from New Jersey that's going to help their blue line. We haven't seen him yet, but what are they going to get from him, and how important is that addition now with all the injuries they have?
It's pretty big, especially since he's coming on the blue line. I mean, you've seen a lot of it. It goes one of the big areas of risk that an NHL team deals with, and this is common in I would say the NFL too. But when you have cluster injuries at a given position, it really forces guys to manage more minutes against much tougher competition, and usually in an area they are very uncomfortable with. It's pretty rare that you see a team deal with cluster injuries like Utah has to a large degree on the blue line, for example, and succeed long term. You just have guys playing out of position, guys playing offhand, whatever the case is. He's another veteran who brings tremendous stability. I mean, John Marino is a guy who's not going to blow your defensive structure on a shift by shift basis, which is the type of concern you have when you're bringing in 6th, 7th, 8th defenders into the lineup, and even in some cases putting them inside of the top 4 against some of the best forwards in the league. He's got an incredible degree of awareness on the ice, spatial awareness. He knows when to play aggressively. On player, off the puck. I think more than anything, he is at least one piece of stability that this team really needs right now. The other thing that I mentioned it earlier, you understand why the coaching staff is doing it, but they are blendering the lines like crazy right now, trying to figure out what works. Last game they went with a very top-heavy lineup with, I think they played Cooley with Keller quite a bit. We've seen that a little bit more lately. But again, those guys come off, and the majority of the time they are not playing, which means you need an insulated lineup, especially on the defensive side of the ice. And a guy like Marino certainly helps that along.
Travis Yost, he's been helping us through this entire season of figuring out some of these teams. There's not a question that we've thrown at him that he hasn't answered phenomenally. And tonight it's the Montreal Canadiens in town, and he's going to be covering this one. And welcome to Delta Center, Travis, and have a fun time tonight, man. We're looking forward to this one. Hopefully the hockey club can get right at home here.
Hey, I appreciate that. Your check's in the mail for phenomenally answered questions, by the way. I appreciate that.
No,
Thanks, boys.
Awesome job. Yeah, we appreciate it. Travis Yost, everybody. There you go. TSN. You can follow him on Twitter. Like, honestly, when he talked about the business side of stuff, that's a lot of the things that he does. They're very analytical. It's not the hockey X's and O's all the time. It's the beyond the ice type stuff that really kind of helps you break down. Because that's why I always ask him some hockey off the ice question. Like, I just don't know. You see these hockey contracts, and they have a hard cap, and that's been criticized because they've had that loophole that some teams have been kind of using. But at the same time, what are you going to do? Tell teams you can't put guys on injured reserve, or right. It's hard to float that line, right? But think about that, a hard cap, and really just. And by the way, all these guys want to get on the ice. These guys all want to get on the ice. They all want to score points. While I'm watching on TV that Jimmy Butler's like, I'm not going to play for you, right? And at the same time, guys sitting out and going, I'm not going to play. Talk to my medical team. It's a world of difference between the NBA to the NHL, and the NBA is the best basketball league on the entire planet by far.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so to have those type of issues that you're looking at, fans are looking around going, what are we doing?
Yeah.
The NHL has not had that yet, and cross your fingers
They won't.
that type of stuff doesn't happen.
They're not built that way.
But part of it is that these guys, when they make $1.1 million, and that's a nice contract for them, it's like, hey, man, that's nice. But now guys are getting paid $7-8 million, and that's still nowhere near.
There aren't $50 million a year guys.
Well, $50 million a year guy. Make $50 million a year if the TV contract deserves it, and if you play 82 freaking games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what it's for. Alexander Ovechkin, didn't he break his leg here?
Yeah, and he's already back.
He's already back, and he's the oldest man on the hockey planet.
39.
Jaromir Jagr's jealous of him getting out there.
And we're jealous of Jaromir Jagr's hair.
Jaromir Jagr's
Hockey hair.
The mullet, man. Oof. Those were that Penguins squad is the picture of like me watching SportsCenter when I was like in 1991.
I thought all hockey players had mullets.
But why did they have to fluff it out so much? Why did it need to be a perm? You know?
No, the question you need to be asking is why not?
I'm like, Super Mario, what's up? And when he'd cut it, you'd be like, I don't like this business Super Mario here.
No.
I don't like Mario Lemieux looking good in a suit. I want him to look a little bit like your trashy cousin at the wedding.
I want him in hockey hair.
Come on. All right. Appreciate Travis Yost whenever he comes on with us. Just awesome. Awesome job. All right. We have some... Should we do our Jazz? Let's wait until the next segment. We've got some Jazz tickets to give away for as I just ripped on the NBA. Sorry. No, not the Jazz. Not you guys. And certainly not the Hornets. I'm not making fun of you guys. I'm saying the rest of those doofuses making all that money and not playing. The Utah Jazz and the Charlotte Hornets, we've got tickets to give away next when we come right back around the corner. So stay right here. 97.5 EKSL Sports Zone.
Accessing.
When TV and radio collide.
Love it.
Wow. This is what you get. You're listening to JJ and Alex, presented by G2G Bars.
Don't touch that dial.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, welcome back. JJ and Alex, 97.5 EKSL Sports Zone. I thought you'd like this tune.
I have so many memories just sitting around with friends playing this game.
My favorite was like I'd be playing with my older brother. And I'd do the ready, down, hut, like if I was barely beating him. And I just kept the huts going. I just kept them going.
While the clock runs?
Oh, I was just like, let's go.
Oh.
And bonus points for how many times our producer Alex has played this game. He had no idea what I even played when I played it for him. I'm all, hey, right? And he's all, don't know what this is. I think this is a mistake. I go, come on, you got to play that.
When did Super Tecmo Bowl come out?
Oh, I bet 89. No, just regular Tecmo Bowl. Because there was Tecmo Super Bowl.
Tecmo Super Bowl was the better game.
Tecmo Super Bowl was a better game. That music's from the original.
The original came out in 1987.
87? Okay. So,
1991 was when Super Bowl came out. And I spent way too much of my
91?
childhood playing that game. 1991, December 1991.
That's when Alex was born. No. He could play. He could be drafted by the Jazz this year.
Were you born in the 90s, or are you a 2000s kid? Oh, my gosh.
Good for him. You know what? We were going to make fun of you, but you're a 90s kid. We're all millennials together. Hey, it's still 99.
Oh, my gosh, you're young.
I was going to homecoming that month in my high school. Or no, I wasn't. Sorry, that was my first year of college. I graduated in 99. So, yeah. That was my first semester at university. So, there we go. Makes you feel old every day. Our producer, Alex, thank you. Appreciate it.
You know what? You know what's going to make me feel young is going home tonight and playing Super Tecmo Bowl.
I'm telling you. So, we have the expansion pack on the Switch.
Yeah.
We have all the old Nintendo games. And I'm going in there. I'm playing Kid Icarus. I'm playing Metroid. I'm playing RBI Baseball. By the way, the RBI Baseball family.
Fun.
Awesome. You look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, they used a square 1-bit ball my entire life.
Yeah.
And I am
and you
like,
loved it.
And my kids are like, how are you so good at this? I'm like, my favorite is they still come to me and they go, can't beat this level. They hand it over for Mario 3. I'm like, all right, I'm good for something still. Crack the old knuckles, get them through. And I fly through these levels sometimes still. And they're like, wow. I'm like, all in the days we were a kid. It's the one thing I can do better than my kids. Super Mario Brothers 3. But I'm proud of them because they're playing it. They're like, oh, man, this is awesome. Because there's still something to those games. It was difficult. They were hard, man.
Yeah.
They were hard to figure out.
You still remember the Contra code?
Up, up, down, left, right, BA. Select start if you wanted multiplayer.
Ooh, I like that.
I went into Metroid. I remembered the one of the passwords for that, too.
That's cool.
Like, my brain doesn't remember jack squat. And I remember from my 9-year-old brain the Metroid
Isn't that crazy?
cheat code.
Yeah.
And I was like, this won't work. I'm like, this won't work.
No,
it's a dumb expansion pack on Switch. Boom.
No, you're
Fired
really a Nintendo freak from the 80s if you still remember the code to go straight to Mike Tyson and Mike Tyson's
Oh,
Punch
now
Out.
that one's hard. Now, what's funny is it's not. So you and I grew up with Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Yes. It's
It's now just called Punch-Out because they don't want to pay Mike Tyson any more money. It's just called Punch-Out. And I'm like, this is sad.
I'm
now,
not playing just Punch-Out. I'm playing Mike Tyson's
I know.
Punch-Out.
You still play him at the end. And it's still the same characters. I'm like, hit King Hippo in the Band-Aid, would you?
Know all the tricks.
Move to the side and hit him with a Band-Aid. All right.
Nintendo games are
way
good.
That music,
they were fun.
That music brought it back.
I'm glad I grew up when I did. Thanks for that.
Music brought it back. There you go. Let me see here. So I've got some tickets to give away. It's a Jazz Ticket Tuesday. That means we are doling out tickets every hour right here across the entire station. 2 more chances to win today. We're going to do one this hour. We're going to do one next hour. So 801-575-ZONE. That's 801-575-ZONE. This is of importance and urgency because the game is tomorrow. This is a Wednesday tip-off, and a Jazz Ticket Tuesday is where you're going to win them right now. They're playing the Charlotte Hornets over here at Delta Center. 801-575-ZONE. That's 801-575-ZONE. 801-575-9663 for your chance to win a pair of Jazz tickets. And we'll do another pair next hour, 801-575-ZONE. Okay. I rolled this list out. You didn't look at it yet, did you?
No.
Did you?
Nope.
Okay. I looked at this, and it's fun because, again, we fall for lists. I love lists. However, this one seemed like a stretch. And this is the ranking of all of the best national champions in the college football playoff era. Okay? Do you remember what year the college football playoff era started?
2014.
14? That's right. And so we're looking at
10 years.
Yes, and I think this might be the 11th year. Well, anyway, bottom line is they're ranking the vast majority of all of the winners here in the top 10. Okay? Let's start at number 10. Here's the crazy thing. I don't remember half these teams. You know what I mean? Because they've got Alabama next to them. And I'm like, which Alabama team was that? Which guy did they have on that team? Number 10 is Clemson, though. The 2016 Clemson team. That was the Trevor Lawrence freshman class, right? Oh, no. Deshaun Watson.
That was Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson and Hunter Renfrow, right?
Yes.
So
correct.
The national semifinal was 31-0. They beat Ohio State that year. You remember this?
Yes.
And so they win that championship in 2016. They're the number 10 on the list. Number 9 is 2014 Ohio State. That was your very first college football playoff winner.
That was a shock. That was it's weird to call Ohio State a Cinderella, but they were. No one expected them to win that title.
Well, part of it was that you remember they got into the top 4. Do you remember what happened that year, how they got in? They got to the Big Ten championship game. They played Wisconsin, and they won that game 59-0. That's the big – okay, by the way, James Franklin are like, every team needs to play a conference championship game. Did you see Marcus Freeman's face, though, when he said that? Like, the eye roll. And by the way, awesome that he beat James Franklin.
A player at Notre Dame said that played a role in their motivation.
It's crazy. But that conference championship game that year in 2014, Ohio State beat Wisconsin 59-0. So awesome conference championship game. And they get to the playoff, and they ended up – and who was their quarterback? I'm trying to figure out. Was 14 – was that
I just remember the running back.
Was it Cardale Jones, the quarterback?
Cardale Jones was the quarterback.
Was he really?
Yes.
Do you remember how we were like, that's the next guy? He's going to be the next guy.
The Chargers thought he was the next guy, too.
Number 8 is the 2017 Alabama Crimson Tide. Not remarkable because they just seem to win so many of these. In fact, they're the number 7 team on the list at the 2015 championship. 2023 brought you your number 6 team overall, which is the Michigan 15-0 season that they had, capping it off with a win in Houston over the Washington Huskies. Now, I don't know why you would be like one national championship is better than the other. There's only one that stands out to you and I. You and I both thought the same thing. Like, there's no way they're going to not rank this team as number 1. Hold my soda, CBS Sports. 2021 Georgia was 14-1. They won that thing. They were the 5th best. 2022 Georgia, 15-0. They were number 4 on the list. Now we're into the Trevor Lawrence era at Clemson. Number 3 on the list is the 2018 Clemson team. Number 2 on the list is the absolute GOAT that should be far beyond the number 1 team in the history of the college football playoff, and that is your 2019 LSU Tigers, who are number 2 on this list, JJ.
They are number 1, and it's not even close.
This is the season that Joe Burrow won the Heisman Trophy, threw 60 touchdowns. 60 touchdowns! On their way to not getting anybody anywhere near that team, they won the semifinal by 3 touchdowns. They won the national championship by 3.5 touchdowns. They were blowing up teams across the entire board. It was the number 1 scoring offense in the history of college football. They had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson on the same freaking team with Joe Dang Burrow.
And they had both eclipse 1,500 receiving yards. Both. And they had a 1,400-yard running back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Oh, yeah. Alex's former Niner, right?
They had NFL guys on their defense.
Oh, my gosh.
They were loaded.
Phenomenal.
And they dominated. I saw them in person.
Okay.
They played Utah State that year, remember?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was good.
Everyone remembers that, right?
My brother played in college at LSU's Death Valley.
Yes.
And he was like, we were lowly UTEP, dude. Like, we knew what the assignment was. Go in there and collect a check and leave. He's like, you're coming out of that tunnel. It was a night game. He was like, that's one of the coolest things ever. You run out, you get to play a night game, and he's like, we're getting spat upon. We're UTEP, man. They lost 56-3. He's like, hey, man. He's like, I got to tackle, not Marshall Falk. What was his name? The other Falk. Kevin Falk.
Yeah.
He's like, I got to tackle Kevin Falk that game. I didn't care. We lost 56-3. It was
probably asked for an autograph.
Business as usual for UTEP in the beginning of the season. But I'll tell you, that was one of the best seasons of college football I've ever seen. Now, this one's a fake one to me. Now, the championship game itself, in the SEC championship game, this is when Alabama beat Florida in the SEC championship game 52-46. You remember that kind of back and forth?
Yeah.
But they defeated their opponents during the season by 29 points plus that year. So that's the biggest gap of what teams got beaten by that year by one single team. But this is 2020, a season impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. But that by itself tells me it shouldn't be number one.
It was a strange season. It was an outlier.
It was a Suckville.
I'm sorry.
2019
LSU would have beat 2020 Alabama by 2 touchdowns.
Yes, absolutely. So
those Georgia teams would have beat 2020 Alabama.
Yeah, both of them.
I think last year's Michigan team beats 2020 Alabama.
Ooh. It's just hard because
that Michigan team was good.
Well, let me just give you an example. Hey, BYU fans. The 2020 team is awesome. But they go 11-1, lose at Coastal Carolina.
Look at the schedule. And I'm not taking anything away. It was a fun year.
I'll take it away.
And we were just grateful to have football.
Yes, we were ecstatic to have games being played.
But if you're
Utah
ranking,
played what, 5 games? Utah played 5 games that year?
Yes.
I remember week after week them getting canceled.
If you're ranking BYU seasons, and that team won 11 games, where do they rank among the other 11 win seasons in BYU history? At the end, right?
Rightfully
if you're being honest. It doesn't take anything away from what that group accomplished in difficult circumstances, but that season was just weird.
You play a bunch of directional Texas schools.
You just did whatever you had to do to get football games in.
Texas State,
and
UTSA.
We're grateful for it, and we'll be forever grateful for it. And it sucks to look back on and see what was actually taken away. But you can't redo it, and you can't do it over again. It is what it is.
They played the games that were in front of them.
But I'm sorry, 2020 Alabama is not the best college football champion of all time. They're just not.
Now, that LSU team should probably be in the discussion of top 5 national championships ever in college football. Ever. That's how good they were.
Yeah.
In the college football playoff era, hard to know yet still because it was, the first 10 years of it was the 4-team model. We've had our first 12-year model this year, and we like it so far, right? Because there's no SEC teams in it. All right, we'll take the break. We'll come back. Did we give those tickets away? Okay, got it. Next hour, we'll do some more. By the way, I wanted to mention also, speaking of giving away free stuff, we have a 4-pack of tickets. Now, this is just between you and me, okay? We have a 4-pack of tickets to give away on Friday during our conversation with Coach Bear Tourney.
Ooh.
The key word is going to be, you ready for this? Because he's back, he's playing. Ingram. So when you hear Ingram said during that interview with Coach Bear Tourney on Friday, you be calling number 12, and you're going to get a 4-pack of tickets to the very next day's game versus the St. Louis Blues. That's a divisional matchup there, JJ.
It is.
So
it's going to be great.
It's going to be awesome. Anyway, more chances to win for the Utah Hockey Club tickets. Just go to the contest page at KSLSports.com. Tune in on Friday when we're interviewing Coach Bear Tourney. You hear Ingram, you're going to be calling number 12 and get those 4-pack of tickets. Okay, we'll come back. We've got more to go. Stay here, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The biggest name. You're locked into JJ and Alex. With the insight and analysis on the teams you can't live without. Presented by G2G Bars. This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Happy afternoon to you. Happy Tuesday. It's a Jazz Ticket Tuesday. Next hour, we're going to do some more tickets to that Jazz and Charlotte Hornets game. It's going to be firing off tomorrow. So last chance to win tickets today. Coming up next hour for tomorrow's game against the Charlotte Hornets over here at Delta Center, the Utah Jazz. All right, so I was a bit disappointed in a couple things. I pointed this out in our meeting, and I was grumpy about it because I went to the – and here's the thing is ESPN, they're getting smart, the AI bots or whomever it is that runs ESPN. My feed got filled up with this thing. It's like, hey – they know my location, I guess, because they were like, hey, you Utah Hockey Club fan, see where your team is ranked in our ESPN midseason grades. Great. I'll bite.
I'm interested.
Come on.
I click.
Let me see what's going on. Click on the story. Interesting thing happens. They have all the teams by alphabetical actual grading. A, Bs, and Cs, and Ds, and Fs are all put into their own category there. So that's how they kind of mix up the teams. But in true ESPN fashion, they put on the thing, hey, you want to skip to your team? They had all the teams up there, So I look for the sports airport code that every team has, that 3 letters that indicate, obviously for Utah, it would be the UTA, right? And so I'm looking for that UTA thing. I'm like, my brain isn't processing the fact that there's no U's in the thing that I'm looking at. So then I start looking around and go, where's the Utah Hockey Club? I can't click on them to skip to them. I don't want to have to go through every dang grade. Show me where they're at. And up there at the top, there was still an Arizona tab. In the article in
ESPN,
the mid-season NHL, mid-season grades, which makes, of course, if your teacher gives you grades but doesn't know your name, do the grades count? The answer to my kids would be, no. She didn't even know your name, dude. She gave you a D. Who cares?
It's been almost a year.
I know. Well, you and I both go to it, and I said, here, look at this. And I was like, how offended am I right now? And then the link was dead. You couldn't go to it because obviously somebody had been like, hey, man, there ain't no Arizona. You got to put Utah in there, man. But the Utah Hockey Club made the article. They just forgot to not do the set it and forget it,
right?
Grid of clicking on teams. The Arizona, what were they? The Coyotes. The Arizona Coyotes still in the hearts of ESPN, all right? And that's the Leonardo DiCaprio meme of people in Arizona going, see?
Yeah.
We need to be on this thing. All right. But that being said, the Utah Hockey Club gets a C+ this year. Now, you brought this up with Travis Yost, and he actually brought it up too. He said, look, and here's what the actual write-up says. So first of all, they do this whole student thing, okay? So the class president is Mikhail Sergachev. Fine. Only one NHL player is ahead of him in average ice time. There's only one player who has logged more shifts. And as of January 11th, nobody has played more shorthanded minutes than Sergachev. Those are awesome stats, by the way. To know that he's
been their best overall player.
No one has played more minutes except for one person in the NHL. No one has played more lines except for one person in the whole NHL than Mikhail Sergachev. On a team that has been absolutely blasted with injuries, consistency like that is not. We haven't celebrated it enough. Now, they talk about Lawson Krause and the danger that he's coming into of quote unquote failing. Utah has 4 players that are responsible for a high percentage of its goals. Krause is not one of those players. And so he says, look, that's a team that's already on the cusp of being in the bottom 10 of goals per game scored. Krause came into the season with 3 straight 20-goal seasons, but now finds himself on pace to finish with only 20 points. That is not a good number.
It's not, and he knows that, and we all know this. We've followed that.
Now
he's frustrated.
First half grades, they've given him a C+. It was around this time last year that the Arizona Coyotes were in a wild card chase to only lose 14 games in a row. This team was part of that. And remember last week when we were talking to Bear, and he said the emotional grind of last year killed us.
The off-the-ice stuff was bothering them a great deal.
This year, and he doesn't want to make an excuse. Everybody's like, this year, some of the physical, some of the ailments, some of the injuries that they've had to
and the illness.
And actually getting sick and guys being like scratches that night before games on the road where they can't play.
I can't believe they won in Calgary.
Oh,
they were ravaged by the flu.
I know. So I think that this team with a C+, you're okay with the C+?
I give them a B-.
Okay.
And you can probably talk me into a B. I say that because why a C+, why a C+ when the expectations were that this is exactly where they're going to be. A C would be average. They're not average in the league.
They're on pace to score fewer points than the over/under prior to the season.
Perhaps.
Now that could go in the other direction. It's
the
very
injuries,
close.
and you also have to grade on a curve, right? You have to grade on a curve. Are we going to do that?
Sure.
Because if the team's ravaged by injuries, how are they handling the injuries? I think they've handled it pretty well. They're still in the wild card chase despite losing key players. They just lost their number one goal scorer indefinitely. So they're going to have to overcome that. But you look at what happened to their blue line. Their blue line decimated. Sergachev's had to be amazing just for them to keep above water.
Right.
Like they've been through a lot of major injuries. Sean Durzi was a major loss. John Marino's making his debut tonight. He's been gone all year. They needed him, and he has not been available. So they're dealing with the injuries. Lamoureux was a big one. Young guy gets hurt. So
when you're asking,
I think when you've overcome all those things to still be in the conversation of a playoff spot, you got to give them better than a C+. Now it's not an A. I don't think they've been, oh my gosh, I can't believe how good they are. They've totally exceeded expectations, and they're in the playoffs already. Like none of that's going on. But they're right where they were probably expected to be.
Mm-hmm. It's tough to not have.
Despite the injuries.
It's the Dylan Guenther injury, I think we're going to look back, and we're already nervous about it.
Yeah.
And the long-term effects it's going to have. But this is the leading goal scorer of the
Who's going to score for this
team?
How are they going to get goals? They're already, as the article said, they're one of the lowest goal-scoring teams, and we've seen that. There's been a lot of one-goal, two-goal nights.
They got stingy goalkeepers. That's great.
Vejmelka's kept them afloat, too. Like, give Veggie a ton of credit. Without him, where would they be right now?
I know.
Whew. Things could be dark. That's why the C+ is like, that's not very nice because, before the season started, if I told you Connor Ingram would be out 2 months, what do you think would have been the expectation then?
Give up 3 3/4
There's
goals a
no
night.
way they're still in the wild card chase.
Right.
There's no way.
That's good news, at least, that Travis Yost would put him in that conversation.
Yeah.
All right. We got to take a break. And what did you say? Out of the 4 teams in the West that are chasing that last playoff spot, he eliminated St. Louis and Calgary. And then
It's Vancouver and Utah.
Yeah. You still insist on saying Calgary, huh?
Just having some fun.
Calgary. It makes it sound like a guy from Los Angeles. Hey, that's Calgary. All right, nominate that U Sports volunteer that you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. The way you do it is you just go to the KSLSports.com/contest page and listen every Thursday. JJ and I read those nominations off, and the winner ends up getting a prize from Hercules First Federal Credit Union in the form of a gift card, and then also $200 of Beehive meals. Awesome way to be able to honor those sports volunteers that do an awesome job in your neighborhood. KSLSports.com/contest. Let us honor those people who are doing a great job with your kids in your neighborhood. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. Hey, Ben Anderson, Jake and Ben fame, and of course he is our Jazz insider for KSLSports.com. Moonlights is that on the side. Actually, maybe it's not on the side. I think that might be front and center.
Dude's got 2 full-time jobs.
He's got a lot going on during the middle of the season. So Ben, nice enough to join us during one of the craziest stretches of the year for him. So we'll come back and we'll chat with Ben about this Utah Jazz team and their shot against the Charlotte Hornets tomorrow night. And we've got tickets for that game as well that we're going to be giving away next hour. So stay here, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.